And welcome to today's edition of Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Well, I'm really excited to get to today's show, which is called Truth Under Fire, The Real Story of Charlie Kirk. And that just happens to be the name of a new documentary just released by my guest, whose name is Joshua Philipp. And Charlie Kirk, as you know, I think you'd have to be under a rock if you don't know now who Charlie Kirk is. But best known to some by his incredibly tragic assassination. But before that, known for his leadership of Turning Point USA. Also, for those of you who follow my podcast, even before it was on YouTube, when it was just audio, you will remember that I had Charlie Kirk as a guest not that long ago. And so it was particularly personally upsetting, besides upsetting really for the whole world, or at least America, that he was assassinated. Particularly upsetting, after having had the pleasure of having him on my podcast, getting to meet him, getting to ask him some really personal questions about his childhood. If you remember, I asked him about how did your parents make a Charlie Kirk? Doubt he got that asked by other people. So let's just begin. So let me tell you a little bit about my guest, Joshua Philipp, besides his having created this incredible new documentary. He is a senior investigative reporter at the Epoch Times. He's a recognized China expert. I'm also going to be asking you some questions about that, Joshua. And he's an award-winning journalist, as I did not yet mention. He's a senior. Well, I did say that he works at the he works at the Epoch Times or as an investigative reporter, but he also does these incredible documentaries. So, Joshua, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a real pleasure being here.
Um, let's see, where can we start? Well, first of all, what I really want to know is how how you went from China to Charlie Kirk. They both start with C. Were you starting at the beginning of the alphabet? How
Oh
did you
man. Yeah.
how did you what is your do you presumably you have some connection to Charlie Kirk before you did the documentary. So tell
Yeah,
me.
so I knew Charlie. In fact, I was supposed to speak at an event with him in Korea right before he was killed. The weekend before, as a matter of fact, I couldn't make it. He was there.
Oh
I, you
wow.
know, I mean, there's a small circle of, I guess you could say, influencers at Turning Point. I speak there at the big events whenever they have it. And so, yeah, it hit pretty hard when I saw Charlie get killed. And I wanted to do a documentary that kind of captured and remembered what Charlie Kirk actually stood for. Because, I think that the way that a person's death is discussed is the way that their memory kind of is carried forward.
Yes.
And when Charlie first was killed, the discussion was what he stood for, his values, freedom of speech, open debate, engaging people, and what looked like a religious revival. And it's kind of shifted now because people are focused on, well, the case and who killed him and so on.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to kind of memorialize that part of his story. And so the documentary goes into who was Charlie Kirk. What did he stand for? What was his effect? But I also importantly go into how the media frames people. Like there's a system in place of the hit pieces, maligning people, destroying their reputations, making examples out of them, and then even framing and attacking anybody who reports on certain issues, which I think is what happened to Charlie Kirk. He was kind of seen as being alongside Trump and helped Trump probably get elected in 2024, especially. And the media tried destroying him for it. And someone was probably so propagandized by that they killed him. So, that was kind of the idea I wanted to go with that.
And so, but I mean, it took months. How many months did you spend on this documentary? Well, I guess we could figure it out.
Oh, I went quick. I went quick. I did this in about 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, but to your point also about China. So I've been with Epoch Times or Epoch Times, depending which country. If you're Canadian or British, it's Epoch. If you're American, it's Epic. So
Okay.
EPOCH.
Right.
I've been with Epoch Times since 2006 and an investigative journalist since 2008. But my investigation started because I accidentally uncovered one of the largest Chinese spy operations in America, which is the United Front Work Department, which, it's people know some of the offshoots of it. People talk about these secret Chinese police stations.
Yeah.
I've been exposing those since, or groups related to that, I should say, since 2008. And, a lot of my work has been on China's subversion of America, then going into American politics and national security. And that's kind of been my whole
Uh-huh.
focus as a journalist. But I've done a lot of investigations. I did the COVID origin investigations.
Yes.
I did investigations into January 6th and, the unreleased footage, which I managed to get. I've done investigations into the border crisis, even traveling into Panama and the Darien Gap and Mexico, exposing how the United Nations was involved with it and how the whole system works. So I do a lot of different types of
Uh-huh.
investigations.
Okay, well, let's start with Charlie Kirk, and then maybe in the third segment um, of three, in case people want to know when we're going to be doing, um, we can get into China because I have a bunch of questions about like the China balloon and all kinds of things.
Oh yeah.
You remember that, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Okay, so Charlie Kirk. So you were in the circle, the small circle around him at Turning Point. And
Well, of the influencers, because
right.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Um, and so what? So obviously you must have believed in what he believed in. Maybe start as an introduction to that, like because people might not have gotten a proper description of exactly what he believed in. So tell us about that.
Yeah.
What?
Well, I think what made Charlie Kirk unique was is you didn't have to believe what everything he believed to be close to him. And I think that's kind of what he represented in a way. He brought Tucker Carlson to speak at Turning Point, and a lot of conservatives are having an argument with him. He brought his Pastor McCoy, to speak there, and a lot of the conservatives don't get along with him. He managed to bring together people who don't see eye to eye. And
Uh-huh.
Charlie Kirk managed to create kind of this big tent of, he had people there who were homosexual, and some conservatives don't like that. You know, he had an ability to bring people together, differences of value, differences of opinion, differences of religion, under really kind of a unifying group, which Turning Point was. But also, I think what he represented, which I very much believe in, is engagement. What he's known for is he'd go to these college campuses and he'd basically say, debate me, here's a microphone. Whoever disagrees with me most,
Right.
I want you to speak first. I want to talk to you. If you have college professors who don't like me, bring them here, tell them to come here and debate me. And I think that's something we kind of lost track of in our society, is talking to people who disagree with us, or who don't like us for that matter, because we don't like to do that.
Right.
Charlie did that, and I think in some ways it was bridging gaps, and if not changing people's mind, showing them the logic in other perspectives. And I think that's what he really, aside from his religious beliefs, he was very Christian, but I think that's what he was really known for, at least on the political side.
Yes. um, which was very unique and also was a lot of what made him so popular because people came to his college events, whether they agreed with him or even if they didn't, so that they could then challenge him. They thought they were going to do. Of course, the thing was, he was so brilliant that when he challenged people to debate him, he always won because he knew more than they did.
Mhm. Oh, he was incredible. He was like a walking dictionary. I mean, you can go watch his videos, or anyone watching this, go watch how he did it. But he would pull out statistics like off the top of his head. He'd be able to list things out. The guy was incredible. That's something you can't train people in. It's almost like you have to innately know how to do that. And Charlie was just very good at it. And he knew issue to issue, topic to topic. People could jump into whatever, and he'd be able to go right there with them. It was incredible.
Yes. So, so what do you think? Who do you think killed him? I mean, you mentioned before you think Tyler Robinson. I mean, that's who's in jail right now,
Mhm.
uh, charged with having killed him. And you were just saying a little while ago that like that the media convinced him, or he was convinced to
Yeah.
be against Charlie Kirk's beliefs, wanting to stop him and so on, and that's why he killed him. I mean, is that what you think is the main, is that the whole story or the main story?
So, I mean, I know there's a lot of speculation on who killed Charlie Kirk right now. The documentary doesn't get into that so much because a lot of it's rumors and there's no evidence, and we'll have to see what goes on with the court case and so on. But I do think so far I'm generally convinced that Tyler Robinson is the most likely suspect. Maybe there were people communicating with him. I don't know. Hopefully we'll find out. But what I really exposed was how Charlie was framed and marked for death by an information machine.
Mm,
And I can explain how the whole thing worked, basically. So the first time Charlie Kirk was attacked, right, the first kind of instance of him being framed was 2017, and this was the Charlottesville riots. This was when you had the Unite the Right protests and so on, and this far right and far left fighting each other on the streets. What happened was this: there was a group going to tear down a Confederate statue. There was a group going there to protest, trying to stop them from tearing down the Confederate statue. Then the far left showed up as Antifa, which was, beating people up and attacking people at the time. And the far right actually showed up, and they showed up with their tiki torches, acting like Nazis and so on. And they fought each other, and it was horrible. A young man drove his car into a crowd, killed someone. It was that was the story, right? Now, what happened after that was something very important. President Donald Trump, during his first term in office, was asked by the media talking about this, and Trump said it was terrible. They were beating each other with bats. They were vicious. And then he said, there were fine people on both sides, but there were a lot of bad people too. And he was asked, will you condemn it? He says, yes, absolutely. Trump condemned both the far left and the far right.
yeah,
Trump very directly condemned both extremes during that event. But the media, what they did is they altered it. They altered his quote. So they did not include the part where Trump very directly condemned and, just disregarded, said, I don't support you guys at all, condemned the far right, condemned the neo-Nazis and everything. He actually did condemn them. The media only took the part where he said there were fine people on both sides,
right.
where he was referring to the moderates. And so the very fine people hoax basically dominated the headlines up until probably like mid Biden administration. It went on for like 5 years, that narrative. What then happened is the media began using that falsified story, which I believe that they knowingly falsified it because they edited his clip in a deceptive way to make him appear to be saying something he wasn't. They then went after all of Trump's supporters and all of his base. And Charlie Kirk was an up-and-coming influence at the time, starting Turning Point. The media went to Charlie Kirk and they said, do you disavow the neo-Nazis and the racists in your group? And the basis of that was is if you were a Trump supporter, they called you neo-Nazis and a racist, right? So that was how they basically flipped the connotation of that,
Uh-huh.
right? The way the media played this game is they said that, well, since there were neo-Nazis at this rally, or they called them that at least, and because they falsely edited Trump's clip to make it seem like he said there were very fine people on both sides, and they removed the part where he condemned them,
Right.
they then said, well, Trump supports neo-Nazis, therefore MAGA, Make America Great Again, and Trump supporters are neo-Nazis. Therefore, any group that supports Trump is supporting neo-Nazis.
Right.
And that was how they did it. So they went to Charlie Kirk and they said, do you condemn these people? He's like, no, like they're not neo-Nazis. What are you talking about? They
Huh.
then framed Charlie Kirk,
Huh.
right?
Huh.
They framed him as being somebody who defended neo-Nazis, who had neo-Nazis and extremists in the alt-right within his base. And they used that to paint him and Turning Point, all until the 2020 election. Then what happened, of course, the craziness of the 2020 election, I'm going to get into that,
Right.
but leading into 2024, Charlie Kirk, much more influential at that time. Turning Point had become bigger than CPAC by the 2024 elections because between 2020, Biden years and 2024, CPAC, although still big, became less influential, Turning Point became significantly more. And Turning Point was becoming kind of the new base of the young, cool conservative, this kind of new movement. And Charlie Kirk was the leader, basically, of the conservative awakening among like Gen Z. So Charlie Kirk was attributed with getting the youth vote for Trump in 2024. After that, the media just went after him like you wouldn't believe because Charlie Kirk was the guy basically flipping the vote, and he's then a political enemy. They then start labeling him, anti-Semitic, racist, bigot. The Southern Poverty Law Center and the ACLU labeled him as like an extremist organization, and these guys are advise even the federal government on training. You're labeling this guy as an extremist, tied in with political extremism, the alt-right, neo-Nazis, and the whole list. And then what happens is you have people who are so violently agitated by these narratives because for the past decade, 10 years, what have they been told? They've been told that there's a threatening movement taking place in the country. It's a threat to democracy itself, that Donald Trump tried overthrowing democracy, that his supporters are trying to alter the country, that it's nationalism and fascism and neo-Nazism,
Yeah.
and that basically every single person around Trump is baby Hitler. That if you don't stop them, they're going to turn the country into like some racist, homophobic, totalitarian, communist, not communist, fascist, dystopia, basically. And so what do? Well, there's that anecdote, if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you do it?
Hmm.
And what they're telling these people is, the media telling these people is, every single person close to Trump is baby Hitler.
Right.
What do you do to baby Hitler? And you saw what happened to Charlie Kirk, somebody I believe who was so radicalized by these narratives and the false framing and the entire machine in place that he felt that he was doing a good thing by going out there and murdering the guy who he actually believed stood for the things he was framed as, when in reality it was a massive propaganda campaign.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't think I was that aware of Charlie Kirk until more like closer to the 2024 election.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know.
Well, that was he started getting really influential, so that makes sense.
I mean, I'm sure I heard his name, but I just didn't. It didn't. I mean, when he became, the more he became connected to Trump, the more
Yeah.
I was paying attention to him.
Yeah, well, he was, touring to Greenland, and he was kind of becoming part of the administration in some ways, like
Yes,
not officially, but kind of.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
And
actually, that's important too, because a lot of people were saying he could have become president,
I was
and
just going to say
yeah,
that. I think he
yeah,
was on his way to, right? Is that, do you talk about that in the movie, in the documentary, that maybe he would have become president?
we get into people talking about it, and
Uh-huh.
I can give my take on that because
Well,
I think he could have actually.
uh-huh. Okay. All right. Well, we need to take a break at this
Mhm.
time. My guest is Joshua Philipp, and we're talking about Charlie Kirk and his assassination, but we're talking about more than that, really about how America, how the media kind of picks picks the people they like and the ones they hate, and how they can try to convince you to do the same. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carol Lieberman. My guest today is Joshua Philipp. He is the creator of a new documentary that was just released, and it is called Truth Under Fire, The Real Story of Charlie Kirk. And we were just talking about how the media shaped people's view of who Charlie Kirk was, which was not the truth, and how that most likely fired up his assassin to take him out. Um, Josh, I'd like to ask you about some of the rumors that, have been going on since you were involved with Turning Point for a long time. Um, what about what about the rumors that it was someone within the Turning Point group who was jealous of Charlie and wanted to be the leader of Turning Point, and that he was behind it as an associate of this, or having paid, Tyler Robinson to kill Charlie.
Yeah, so just to clarify, I'm not part of Turning Point.
Oh,
I've spoken at their events, but I'm
okay.
not part of it. I'm with
Okay.
Epic Times, of course.
Yes. Okay.
But yeah, beyond that point, I mean, I've looked into it, and from what I've seen, at least in my opinion, and I respect people's opinions, I don't think there's enough evidence to actually substantiate that claim. Like, as an investigative journalist, the evidence is not strong enough to make the allegation. Um, a lot of it is what you call like parenthetic evidence. And so this is basically the narrative. There were text messages, people didn't like him, or they believed that he was losing them money from donors because of his political positions, especially around like Israel. And they were making these allegations, right? This is what's complicated with that. If you were to have the leader of almost any organization get killed, and you wanted to open up the text messages of everybody within an organization, you're going to have evidence of disagreements. You're going to have evidence of people wanting to move up the chain. You're going to have evidence of people disagreeing with the policy that may have affected like donations. Almost every organization is going to have communications like that. And so I don't think communications like that would be evidence anywhere near enough to suggest that it was an inside job and somebody killed him because of it. There's a pretty massive jump in logic that would be needed to make that conclusion, which is why, again, I mean, I don't know that, we don't really know. Again, there's no guilty verdict out. We don't know who did it. But I don't think the evidence is strong enough to actually jump that gap and come to that conclusion.
If you did it, just theoretically, this would be a perfect cover to
Yeah,
do a
right.
documentary about him. And
Yeah, hey, now you're thinking, huh? Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
I'm sorry to, one of the things I do is I'm a forensic psychiatrist and expert witness, so I think like this.
yeah.
Um, what about also there was talk of Erica Kirk, um, that maybe she wanted to be the head of Turning Point, and so she
Well,
had him killed.
again, I don't think the evidence is strong enough to come. Again, I think very strong claims require very strong evidence, and I don't think the evidence is strong enough on it. Um, again, as an investigative journalist, it's like if I'm going to say something, I need to prove it. I need to prove it
Yes,
strong enough where I could defend it in court if I had to. I mean, I don't mind people debating. I have no issue with that. Like if it is, it is. If it isn't, it isn't. But as a journalist, like I would not include that
right.
with the reason being I couldn't prove it. You know
Uh,
what I mean?
uh,
Like the standard I have, which from my company, Epic Times, um, if we can basically report anything, but if we report it, it has to be strong enough where we could defend it in court if we were challenged on it.
mm, mm,
And so the amount of requirement of proof is very strong. And I feel a lot of these rumors, again, it's more like people allege that there were like disagreements or disputes. My argument would be, I don't know, is there a marriage without a dispute? Is there an organization where someone isn't trying to like, rise up in power? I don't think that would justify that extreme of a conclusion personally. Although again, I respect people's opinions,
Well, what about you know, at the beginning there were, I mean, right after he was killed, there was all of this talk about um like people making signals. It seemed like people who were with Charlie Kirk were making signals, hand signals, different kinds, and somebody took a video from behind the, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, all these different
Yeah,
kinds of.
yeah.
So what have you found
So,
anything about that?
I mean, I did see it. Someone sent me the video. The guy's like moving his hat.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't know. I've spoken at events. I've seen people like, playing with their hat or their glasses, and I mean, again, I have no idea.
Uh-huh.
I think it also requires a very strong jump in logic to suggest that,
Well,
because I've seen people naturally doing stuff like that too.
well, do you know, maybe you know this, are there people who will be coming out of the woodwork when the trial starts to try to say that somebody else did it? Do you know that?
I don't, but I will say this. If I were to go by the evidence I've seen around the whole case and whether someone else was involved and whether there were communications, I can say that the strongest evidence that maybe there was somebody else involved was the weird text messages, where Tyler Robinson was allegedly, texting to his, I guess, boyfriend. I don't know how you define these things, right? The
Partner.
trans dude, lover, right?
Yeah.
Um, where he was basically saying in the text messages, I acted alone, I did this. And the way it read, in
Uh-huh.
my personal opinion, the way it read was that he was trying to cover grounds to eliminate further investigation. Because as an investigative journalist, I've seen things like that in the past.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I've investigated murders, I've investigated spy networks, I've investigated like international scandals, like I've investigated some pretty crazy stuff, and I've seen in the past how the steps people will take to try to cover their tracks. And to me, personally, in my own personal opinion, the text messages looked like he was trying to cover the tracks of
Uh-huh.
possibly outside involvement, or maybe somebody else maybe communicating with him at the very least.
Well, it was so strange that he became this great shot. I mean,
Yeah.
this really unusually good shot from a relatively far distance, when he hadn't really, or well, to our knowledge, he hadn't really had that much experience with shooting. I mean, I think he belonged to a shooting range or something, but it just seemed like beyond what he should have been able to be capable of, unless he was doing a lot of, shooting that people didn't know about. The other thing was, I read a report about how there were a lot of strange cars
Mhm.
near the apartment where he and his lover lived, right before this happened.
I did see reports saying that. I mean, I don't know. Again, I think with all this, I mean, it's who knows? Again, possibility. For me, at least, the evidence is not quite strong enough. Because I mean, here's the thing: as an investigative journalist, if people provide me with evidence, I will then investigate it. But looking into it, I have not found evidence, frankly. Like a lot of it's just rumors and claims, and this person said
Right,
this.
right.
The actual like evidence that I could demonstrate to make a grounded claim, for me as someone who does investigations, the evidence is not strong enough for me to take it that seriously.
Uh-huh.
You know, I
One
mean, at
of
least
the,
that's my personal view on it.
did you go into in the documentary anything about, well, I'm sure you went into the alleged assassin.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, one thing is, like, I can tell you the one thing that is very, very big that I do think could suggest outside involvement was the message allegedly written on the bullet casing with the Bella Canto,
yes.
because that is actually a reference. That's an Antifa reference. And so the Antifa references and the language used to associate to Antifa, if I were to speculate, okay, if I were to speculate, I would actually speculate that he had communication with other Antifa members or
Uh-huh.
Antifa members, and maybe they were somehow involved. And if you want to, branch off from there, maybe someone was communicating with them. But I think it would, and that would also explain why he looked like he was trying to cover up any claim of outside involvement.
Uh-huh.
I acted alone within his messages. Like as an investigator, that
Yeah,
that would be something
right.
I would look into, and I did talk about that in the documentary actually.
And it actually goes back to what you were saying at the beginning about 2017, when there was
Hmm.
Antifa on the one side and the so-called neo-Nazis on the other side. So maybe they've held this grudge against him.
You could be, you never know. Yeah. But Antifa would protest at his events all the time. Like Charlie Kirk was a very popular figure, hated by Antifa. And so
Uh-huh.
like the motive was there, and he was almost like a symbol of everything they hate. And so
Uh-huh.
that would have made a lot of sense.
Yeah, like you were saying, like a little Donald Trump in a way.
Yeah.
Um, okay. What else was I gonna shoot? Um, so are you close with Erica
I am not. I actually I don't think I've talked to her before. Yeah.
ever?
Not that I recall. I mean, I
I
again,
think you would recall because she would grab you by the head.
well, I mean, not
Like
from my
JD
recall in
Vance,
terms of,
you'd be in this
yeah,
intimate hug.
we'd have
You
a nice long
would
hug. Yeah. No,
remember.
I mean, the only time I would have met her would be if, because I interviewed Charlie several times, like, at Turning Point events and stuff like that, because I do interviews there. The only time I could have possibly met her would be if Charlie was there, but it, I don't recall personally.
Yes, well, that was something I was talking about that hug. That was quite some hug. Um, I was not a fan because I mean, I don't know, it almost looked like, and I don't know this, I've never spoken to her. Um, but uh, it's almost seemed like what she said, as I'm sure you know beforehand, she said something about no one could replace Charlie, but then she went on to how JD Vance was, equally good or something like that, was also a good man or something. And she hugged him in this way in a very intimate, people don't, women especially don't, or men either for that matter, you don't put your hand on somebody's head when you're hugging them in that kind of an intimate way. It really almost did seem like she was trying to say, could you replace Charlie? Or I'd be happy to marry you now that I'm free, or something like
I
that.
I
It
have
was
no
really
idea.
inappropriate, you know?
I can say this though. Turning Point USA, I think, is now probably the most powerful conservative organization in the United States.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so, in some ways, Erica Kirk is now kind of the kingmaker of the Republican Party.
Uh-huh.
She has a lot of influence. And so, she has become a very, very powerful political figure. Um, which, because you got to think, Turning Point was already pretty big. After the death of Charlie Kirk, I think the number of people applying to register Turning Point branches at American colleges increased. Last I checked, like 50 times or something insane like that. And so they were big already. They just got like 50 times bigger. The upcoming Turning Point event, just a few weeks from now, in fact, it's going to be in Arizona. Last I checked, they were already sold out. Um,
Mm.
Last year they had 50 or 20,000 attendees. Even at the time of the memorial for Charlie, even at that time they had already gotten 20,000 people pre-registering,
Oh,
and so Turning Point is going to be very, very powerful. And one thing you are going to run into when you're suddenly thrust into that position is a lot of people are going to want to, get on the bandwagon, so to speak, for
yeah.
the if you become the organization that can get people into office or whatever, everybody's going to be trying to get you to get your blessing, and so I
Okay,
think
so
I do
Erica,
think they're
forget
going to deal
about
with
what I
that.
just said. Forget about what I just said. I want to be your friend, your BFF.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah.
Um, what else was I going to say? Well, I mean, I guess maybe she might be thinking something like if JD Vance is going to run for president, which presumably, of course, he will, and hopefully he'll get elected, maybe she's thinking, that she wants him to pick her for, if not his wife, then his vice president.
She could. I mean, who knows? But she could. Um, Again, she now holds a lot of influence on within the Republican Party, because you know what Turning Point represents really? It represents what a lot of people call like the sleeping giant of the conservative movement, which is the evangelicals, like the Christians. And a lot of times, the churches don't really organize to vote. But if the congregations are the kids and so on are into Turning Point and that's what they represent, they get the religious vote. They are incredibly influential because of that.
Yes, yes. Well, I am really happy that that they are a big part of bringing religion back in general, because our country has lost it. And with COVID and people, churches and synagogues closed, because government said you can't go to church or synagogue because
Yeah.
you'd be too close to each other, blah, blah, blah. And synagogues and churches have lost people. People have just gotten kind of, they stopped paying attention. They stopped feeling how good it feels to be at a service. So I'm very happy that, that he and she and all of that have brought are bringing that back, religion back. And certainly Donald Trump, even just from his inauguration, I was at the inauguration. Were you there too, by any chance?
I was not. I
Uh-huh.
wish I wanted to go, but I was doing. I'm based in New York for my
Uh-huh.
show, but I was doing the broadcast here. We did like an all day
Uh-huh.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yes, it was amazing, absolutely
Mhm.
amazing. And he, made sure, like as you saw, um, that there were so many different religious figures, at the actual inauguration, saying prayers and all of that. I mean, and certainly before and after that, he has done things, said things to try to bring America back to religion. Well, we need to take another break. Um, Now I think we can, this is sort of a good maybe segue for I mentioned COVID. I didn't do it on purpose. Unconsciously, I mentioned COVID. And this will be a good segue into your work for the Epic Times in regard to China,
Mhm.
communist China. So stay tuned. We will be right back. My guest is Joshua Philipp. We've been talking about Charlie Kirk, and we're going to go into, he knows where the bones are buried, or the chopsticks or something, in regard to the Chinese Communist Party. So stay tuned. And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. We're talking today about Truth Under Fire, the real story of Charlie Kirk, which is the new documentary. Boy, talk about a documentary that has a built-in audience. You're going to be getting, you know, tens, hundreds of thousands of people watching it. Um, and so my guest is Joshua Philipp, and his documentary, as I was saying, just got released. And he's an award-winning journalist and senior investigative reporter at the Epic Times, and he's the host of Crossroads, a news and analysis program on Epic TV. And one of the things that he has spent a long time investigating is the how the Chinese Communist Party has been making its inroads into America, and that includes COVID, but it's much more than COVID. So,
Oh yeah.
um, welcome back. And why don't you? I've been really curious about all kinds of things with the Chinese Communist Party. Of course, particularly COVID, but also TikTok, and also
Mm.
the China balloon. I wrote um, an op-ed on that. Um, and I've been trying to get people to pay more. I was at the time trying to get people to pay more attention to it than people were doing. Um, so start wherever you want on this.
Oh yeah. Well, I've done quite a lot of investigations into the CCP. I recently did some investigations into China buying up American farmland,
Yes,
strategic locations. I did on the ground investigations in California. Do you remember they said they found a Chinese virus lab in California that had Ebola?
yes.
I went there and I investigated that whole thing. That was incredible.
Was it true?
It turns out that they actually destroyed all the evidence before they never even tested what the vials contained. We don't even know what was there. Um,
What?
Big story. Yeah. Do you want to hear it? I can tell you all about that one.
Yes, who did
All right.
destroy them?
All right. So, okay, for your audience,
Yes, yes.
do you all remember there was that crazy story that was going around that said that a random Chinese virus lab was discovered in like one of the farming towns in Southern California, or like Central California. And then the reports came out that they found Ebola in one of the vials, and then the reports came out that no, the whole thing was a giant conspiracy, and then stop talking about it. So I went there. I went to go investigate it. Um, I met with the um, I met with the fire inspector who discovered the building and some of the local officials there. And so this is how the whole thing went down. Basically, there's a building, and part of it is like a recycling center, and at the back of it is an old refrigeration center for like groceries that used to be part of like a train network. Big windowless building and so on. And in the place where the freezers used to be was where the secret virus lab was, right? So this fire inspector is going around and she's checking out a building, and then she notices there's like someone drilled a hole into one of the walls and put a hose in. And normally she said that's when like maybe there's a homeless person in there, like something like that.
Mm.
So she knocks, and a guy opens the door in like virus, like full body outfit, right?
Oh,
And she's like what did I just discover?
yeah.
She's asking, what's going on here, and they're like, oh, we're making like I can't remember, like COVID test kits or something like that. This is what they're being charged with. They're being charged with making counterfeit COVID test kits. They were selling on them like Amazon. So if you were buying COVID test kits on Amazon, you might have used one of these,
Huh.
right? Enjoy that news. So she ended up getting into the building, and it's like boxes stacked to the ceiling, refrigerators with vials in them, and then this stench hits her, and she gets further back, and there's just cages and cages of these mice. So I'm sure some of you heard about these mice with humanized lungs. That's what they had there, and they use them for like virus research. Crazy point. This was one of the big findings from this investigation. There's almost no regulation in the United States on independent virus labs. So
Huh.
you can very easily start your own virus lab. You can buy humanized mice. They're only like $7 each. They're not even expensive. And you can buy live viruses and experiment with them in your own private virus lab. And there's almost no oversight, very little regulation, and that's what this was basically. It
Oh,
was one
wow.
of these things. And the real concerning part is, they shut it down. They were concerned about bad wiring and fires and so on.
Oh, yeah.
The people running it were later charged with, doing counterfeit COVID test
So
kits,
they really
all
were
this stuff.
doing the test kits, or that was just what he said to as
They
an
were, yeah, they were.
huh.
It was apparently they infect the mice with COVID, and then they extract something from like their stomachs, and then they use those and put it on the test kits, and like that
Huh.
stuff like that. But What was crazy was this. So within the refrigerators, there were all these vials, and the whole story that they had Ebola there came from that. So there were unlabeled vials. There were vials labeled in Chinese handwritten stuff. There were vials with just numbers, and they didn't know what it was. And so they call up the FDA and say, "Hey, we found something kind of crazy. Can you come and investigate?" The FDA hung up on them, and it ended up getting to the point where they were so concerned. They testified before Congress remotely because it was during COVID. They ended up getting so concerned they were worried there's going to be electric fire. What if the electricity goes out and the refrigerators shut off? Are they going to have a virus outbreak at this lab? They were terrified. So they called in an organization that does laboratory disposal, and they just destroyed everything. They
Oh,
burned everything. So we to this day, we do not know what was in those vials. And again, there was a piece of paper with Ebola written on it with unlabeled vials. But also apparently FDA
wait,
would
there
not would
was,
not
wait, there
yeah.
was, that was found a piece of paper with the word Ebola
Yep.
on it in England.
That's where the story came from.
Uh-huh.
And when they said that it was fake, that was based on nothing. They never investigated. They never tested it. They never found out what it was.
How come, I mean, did they make a big, did they uh, publicize the fact that the FDA wouldn't come to check it out?
They did, and the media ignored it. I did a short special investigation, like mini documentary on this. It's also on epictv.com if anyone wants to watch it. But yeah, it was crazy. And the whole story got into like broader, Chinese Communist Party, United Front networks because
Uh-huh.
some of the people were tied in with that. Like there were actually indirect Chinese Communist Party ties to some of the individuals who were involved in like investing in it and stuff.
Are the main people involved in jail?
Well, last I checked, they were still facing this whole case of allegations of counterfeiting, but they were trying to sue the city for killing their mice, you know. But the crazy thing is the mice were so badly treated. The mice were cannibalizing each other. They had them in these like
Uh,
cages overcrowded, and they had day lamps on them 24 hours a day, and the mice were like going insane. So
I've done experiments with mice. Um, I used to do the science. I grew up in New York, and I
mm,
used to do the science fair projects every year.
not nice.
And I did experiments with mice in color and all that. And yes, if and also, I mean, the putting mice in too crowded of a space, they do start eating each other.
Yeah.
And really, that is a metaphor for what happens with people. Not necessarily eating literally, but that's when everything goes wrong, like in New York City, for example. That is
Yeah,
going
well,
to be even
go to Times Square, you might experience that.
exactly,
Yeah,
especially these days, soon
yeah.
to with Mom Donnie soon to be in office. um when you said about the smell, I was thinking there was this so it was dead mice, that it was something dead that was causing that disgusting
Yeah.
smell.
Well, it was that and the waste. It was probably a combination, but it
Uh-huh,
was it was
uh-huh.
terrible. They had to destroy them, unfortunately.
So what do you know about the China balloon?
The giant balloon. Well, if you were to take my opinion on it, I don't think that they would need a balloon to gather intelligence. I think that was more meant to be an insult to the United States. I think what the CCP was doing was two things. One was insulting America. Number two was penetration testing. And so countries will do this. They'll say, okay, if we were to launch an attack on your country using this method, how long would it take you to respond?
Mm.
What would the response patterns be? And how would you respond? And the finding was America would not respond. America would watch it. America would not shoot it down because the modus operandi is you don't want to shoot it down and risk, it falling on somebody. And you'd wait till it goes across the entire United States and then you can shoot it down in the water. Meaning the CCP now knows that is our mode of operation. And if they did want to weaponize that, say they put a bomb on it, say they put a weapon on it, say they
Right.
put a
Well, let's
virus
say,
on it.
yes, exactly, a virus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they could do that and bring it over the entire continental United States before we probably react.
I mean, that was the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Um, and of course he didn't know what was going on at any particular time. So, a balloon? What's
Well, the
wrong with a
auto pen
balloon?
did. The auto pen did.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It should have done something. Somebody should have
Yeah.
woken it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, well, that's very disturbing. I mean, yes, and it's disturbing that that they're buying more. What's happening with the farmland? Like I've read stories here and there where some states were like passing laws that they wouldn't let China buy farmland. But what is happening in
Yeah.
general?
So there's two sides with it. So a lot of the farmland has been bought that has been purchased by China is through Syngenta, which is like a seed company, like it's like a biologically altered seeds and stuff like that. And then the other big one is through Smithfield Foods, which the CCP was allowed to buy. So you have these two Chinese companies that were able to buy up a lot of American farmland. But this is where things get interesting. So people have probably heard a couple things. On one side, they hear, hey, China's buying up land right next to key military bases. A big story came out where some Chinese actor bought a trailer park right next to where the American like B-2 stealth bombers are located, like right next door to it, so they could actually monitor if the planes were taking off and flight patterns or whatever. You also probably heard that if you're watching like corporate media, what they've been saying is that, well, Chinese farmland purchases account for less than 1% of foreign owned land in the United States. Like even Canada owns more. This is why that matters. When you do have some major land ownership, again, like Smithfield or Syngenta or something like that, but the important part is not so much quantity, it's the strategic quality.
Right. Oh,
And
uh-huh.
so what they're doing is this. If a farmer owns like, 50 acres, 100 acres, 500 acres of land, you have these Chinese buyers coming in and they're saying, hey, we just want to buy this tiny, let's say like, 1 acre or something like that. We just want to buy this one little piece and they'll pay in cash. They'll pay far above market value. And a lot of farmers are selling, not their entire farmland, but a tiny little corner to these random Chinese buyers coming with suitcases of cash. And it just so happens that a lot of those strategic purchases are right by like key assets, whether it's American waterways or bridges or military bases and things of that sort. And there really is not proper investigation into, what is going on at these sites of
Hmm.
purchase.
Hmm.
The other side is a lot of it goes through multiple levels of shell companies. So it might be like Chinese actor here, register as a business here, co-owned by an American Chinese or second generation Chinese who's friends with this guy, or co-owned with like an American businessman who has ties to China, and then they have another shell company, and the property might be a registered asset of like the corporation of the shell company, which is tied in with these guys, and that's the way they do it. It's if anybody's ever looked into like the way money laundering works or the way countries get around sanctions, they're using the same methods with a lot of
Hmm.
these farm purchases.
Hmm. I think America, not Trump, but through the years, in general, certainly the last 4 years, I mean, certainly the Biden and Obama administration, um, have taken the Chinese threat much too lightly.
Yeah.
That's why we're in such a spot. And of course, TikTok. And we don't have time to talk about TikTok because we're kind of at the end. Um, but what I do want to, I mean, well, just let me ask you one quick question with TikTok. I mean, supposedly now it's with an American, it's not owned by the Chinese Communist Party, but is it, if you really go back far enough, is it like what you were just talking about?
So the problem you have is when a lot of these American tech companies are just as tied in with the CCP as ByteDance was. And so like
Huh?
the problem might not show itself for another few years, but TikTok was not the only problem of data monitoring and data purchases. like Chinese companies will just buy American data from data brokers here anyways, and Chinese data law require access to the CCP. And so I personally think that there's a much bigger issue. I do think
Mhm.
TikTok's problematic, but I think it's a much bigger issue than just that.
Well, with TikTok, I mean, it's such a good way. Like they are clever in the ways that they kind of insinuate themselves, to
Yeah.
destroy America because they're playing the long game. I don't
Mhm.
have to tell you this. Whereas we're just looking what's what's right in front of us.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
mean,
well,
the whole
the bigger problem is the algorithm control. So I do think it'll fix that problem at least.
Uh-huh. But I
Yeah.
mean, even just for how long it's been in existence, telling
Yeah.
kids to do these things that
Oh
end
man,
up
yeah.
killing them or hurting them, or telling them to spit on the food in the grocery store and like during COVID and all
Yeah.
of that. Um, and also, yes, you were talking about buying data. I mean, I know because I actually talked about this in one of my terrorist therapist podcasts about how COVID was a bioterrorism weapon,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
how you know I mean, of course, Fauci Fauci helped them a lot, um but anyhow, but even aside from all of that, just the fact that that TikTok itself, really has been giving kids for years now like misinformation, wrong information, getting them to pay attention to things that they shouldn't be paying attention to, taking up their even just generically or like benignly taking up their time instead of allowing them to study. They're obsessed with TikTok. Anyhow, all right, it was great talking with you. Now I want you to tell people where they can find your documentaries and your show.
Yeah, so go to epochtv.com, EPOCHTV.com. I do a lot of documentaries. My show Crossroads is also there.
Okay.
I know
EPOCTV.com.
EPOCHTV.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you. Yeah,
EPOCH TV. Wrote
thank
it
you.
down right.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
EPOCHTV.com. Okay, well, yes, I am sure people are going to be so you've piqued people's curiosity, I am
Oh,
sure.
thank you.
It was a pleasure to chat with you, Joshua Phillip. Thank you very much. And thank you all for listening, watching. Um, you've been watching Dr. Carol's Couch, and we'll be back next week.